What's up, everybody? This is Matt Forte here with Jason Romano on Sports Spectrum. And Jason, I'm excited today because we're on the precipice of Father's Day. And with Father's Day weekend coming up, we had to have somebody on the podcast, none other than the illustrious. I have to give him his props. The illustrious, the legendary Ulysses Gene Forte. My dad is on the podcast. This is going to be a great conversation with him. Dad, welcome to Sports Spectrum. This is your first and only time that you've ever been on Sports Spectrum. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. And this is the first time I've been on a podcast also.
Yeah. I'm glad the tech. So you're more tech savvy than mom is. No disrespect, mom. I know she gonna hear this, but you're more tech savvy than she is. So it wasn't hard to get you on here. You've always been. Even when I was young, I would walk in, you'd be on the computer doing something for, you work for a
Right,
Shell Oil Company for 36 years,
right,
um, out there in New Orleans. But when it comes to that, that is one of the things that I took from you that you actually probably didn't even know when it comes to fatherhood is the consistency factor. You have always been consistent in whatever it is you were doing. If it was mowing the yard, you could use I'm gonna do it every Friday then or every Saturday.
right.
We knew what your schedule or your regimen was, and I thought that was important. And I went to the NFL and I had to make a regimen and do that. So where did you kind of learn that from? Being consistent and having that regimen, because you played football, you played college football at Tulane as well as I did, so I followed in your footsteps. But yeah, where does that come from?
I think that developed when I was younger and my father was a Baptist minister for over 50 years in the Texarkana, Texas area. And every Sunday morning, we were getting up and going to church. Uh, he was dedicated to his craft and really showed, me and my sisters, uh, what dedication to something was. And I think that's really where it originally came from.
Yeah. Grandpa, I've seen that in him too, going out there in the summer with your oldest son, my older brother Brian,
Right,
and being able to be out there and be a part of that. But that is something that's important, I think, too, is I think routineness can become mundane and boring to people sometimes, and it's like, oh, it's the same cycle over and over. But God has, if you look at it, you see and read throughout the scriptures, Jesus is in the mundane task of life. And
right,
how did you keep from feeling that mundaneness or the routineness of life and getting joy out of that and saying, I have to, because that's how things work. And we live in the day and age of the microwave generation where people think that success comes overnight or that you can plant a seed and then boom, it's supposed to sprout the next day. But it really takes a process, just like the sanctification process of your soul. It really takes a long
right.
process to really get to somewhere that God wants you to be. So how did you keep from not buying into all right, I'm tired of this, and then impulsively hop into the one thing to the next?
Right. Uh, well, I think that, during my journey that I did kind of go a different way because I had been in church from the time I could remember. And I remember when I went to college and was away from home, I had said to myself, I've been to church enough. I think I've, uh, done enough time. And I found myself on Sundays uh, at school. I missed like maybe one or two Sundays not going to church, maybe a little more. And it was something missing on Sunday morning, and so I started going to FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and we were reading the Bible and so forth, and things that I had heard before, and were coming into play. And I think that I really missed, going to church with my father and my sisters and that type of stuff. And it came back to me, and I started going to a Catholic church near the Tulane campus, which I had never been to a Catholic church before, but uh, and started getting back into it because not going and not hearing my dad preach and not hearing some type of religious message uh, made me miss something. So,
Yeah.
I missed the routine of going to church.
Yeah, and speaking of going to college, going off to Tulane, let's have a little fun. I want you to tell a few. I know the answer, and that Jason doesn't know. And this is for him and the listeners too. You had an opportunity. Yours is a little different walk than I did. I had one scholarship offer to Tulane, and I was like, boom, taking it. I'm going
Right,
there. And it was actually kind of a spiritual aspect of it because I wanted to go to the big schools. I wanted to go to SEC or, play in the Big 12, Big 10, whatever it was. I would go there.
right,
And I prayed as a teenager and I said, Lord, make my decision easy for me because Brian had went to college and there was people transferring from big schools coming back to where his school was. And, they didn't like it there. So they're moving here and moving there. And I was like, I don't want to, which is the actual culture of college football now. You can just transfer at any time, just all over the
yeah,
place.
yeah, right,
And I didn't want to be one of those guys. And the Lord answered. When you're young, He'll answer like little prayers like that to say, "Hey, I'm real." And it was like you get one scholarship offer, but yours was much different. You had a chance to go to like Texas and Texas A&M, and many different schools offered you. But what made you choose Tulane?
yeah, yeah. You're right. We were in Texas where the Southwest Conference was. There was a lot of schools, big schools, Arkansas, University of Texas, Houston, just and I was getting letters from everybody, and coaches coming to the house and recruiting me, and so I had the visit to Tulane, and this is really funny because I like to eat, and the food in New Orleans was so different from anything I had ever had, and I also like landscape and the oak trees on McAllister Avenue that goes down by Tulane and St. Charles Avenue, and just the big oak trees. I was like, man, hey, food and landscape, this is the place for me. And really, that's kind of what got me. And it was, it was a smaller school, and I looked at the depth chart, and at the depth, my second choice was Texas A&M, and I looked at the depth chart at Texas A&M, and even though I thought I was a pretty good player, but they got a lot of people here, and it seems like maybe by the time I'm a junior, I might be getting on the field. Um, so I looked at Tulane and I said, okay, I see sophomore right here, maybe even freshman. And so that was some of the things that came into play for me choosing Tulane. And a funny thing about that, when I got back and I told my coach, Coach Bryant, I said, yeah, I'm going to Tulane. He said, Tulane? Why are you going to Tulane? And I said, I like the school, coach. I didn't tell him all the other stuff about how good the shrimp etouffee and all that stuff was in New Orleans and the po' boys.
Yeah,
So,
speaking of that, this past about a month ago, a few months ago, I went back and I brought your grandsons with
yeah,
me to go back to
yeah,
Tulane and speak to the team. But there was crawfest going on, and I hadn't had crawfish in probably a year or more, and I had to bring them on campus to get the crawfish. And
right,
I'm telling you, we punished them.
right,
We probably ate 10 pounds a piece of crawfish
yeah,
that day because I didn't know the next time we was gonna get them. So
uh,
I can see that. I can see that happening
yeah,
because
yeah.
I grew up in Louisiana, and I'm like, man, you made your decision off of food, but then as I've been living in Chicago and I haven't been able to get down there as much, now I'm like, oh, I get it. I get it.
Right,
So it
right,
makes sense to me. And
yeah.
not and something else makes sense to me too, because I didn't realize why you had us do so much yard work when we was little. I thought it was because it's trying to teach us diligence or something like that. You just like landscape, man. You just had us
That's
out
right.
there working for you,
I
doing
like
the landscape.
I like to have a nice yard also, and that was my Tulane was my first taste of crawfish. Also, we I think it was something like a crawfish. They just had it on the tables and stretched out, and I was like, man, this is crawdads. We called them crawdads in Texas, and we
Yeah,
didn't eat them. And I looked at them, and people were just digging into that. So I tried it, and it was over. Once
yeah.
once I tried it, it was over.
Jason, you ever had crawfish before?
No, I haven't, Matt. And I was thinking about this. We should have had some when we were at the Super Bowl. When we were
Well,
Yeah,
down there. Super
it
Bowl
was a
weekend.
yeah,
little early. It was a little early for the season,
Okay.
but we should have probably went down there and had some when we were down there. But
Next time. Next
yeah,
time.
yeah, next time. So I want to get into the. I've been reading a little bit in the Old Testament. I've been going through the Bible this year, and we started in the Old Testament chronologically, and a lot of characters come up. Then a lot of actual good and bad attributes of what fatherhood looks like and what it doesn't look like. And when it
hmm
comes to kind of the thing I want people to learn, or like maybe there's some young men listening, or even older men, about the character of being a good father and how impulsivity doesn't act towards our best interests. If we look at Moses, Moses did not get to see the promised land because he struck the rock instead of speaking to it. That may sound like
right,
something minuscule, but it was impulsive. And then I've
right,
been reading about Saul, and Saul only cared about, justifying himself. He would act on impulse, wouldn't inquire God before going to war, and things would happen. And, basically, the priest Samuel said, as you tore my robe, God has torn the kingdom from you, and he's
right,
building up someone else to take over. So every time there's you know these threads that go throughout the tapestry of history in the Bible and in Old Testament, of impulse doesn't work good in a man's favor. So what kind of things scripturally have you seen from the Bible, or or maybe in life, or both, that you would say, yeah, this is a good character for is a character trait of a father, and I would see things against, like, impulsivity.
right. I would say that if you think about God as a father, okay, and if you have children, how you think about your children and how um, that you want the best for your children, but then they have their own free will, and you can't force that free will on them, but you can uh, maybe live and talk to them and have them go to church or take them to church so they can be exposed to the what God is and what God has for them. So I look at it as uh, the love that God has for us. If you look at your children, and if your child does something bad, or against what you want them to do, you still have that love for them. No matter what it is, even if your child ends up in prison or something like that, you still have that love for them and that forgiveness for them. And through reading scriptures, that's what I found that God has for us. Even when we go against Him and do things that we should not do, there's that forgiveness and a way to that forgiveness. And that's what I've learned from some of the scriptures and so forth that I have read, um, that that unending love that God has for His children.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. And it reminds me of Galatians 5:22, and talks about the fruit of the spirit of,
Right.
love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, gentleness, faithfulness. And like self-control and like all of that takes discipline, I
It
think,
does.
to really have that. And when we talk about impulsivity, it's probably a lack of discipline. So it doesn't really say, the word discipline, but the word diligence is in the Bible a lot when they talk about that. Be diligent,
Right.
and guard your heart at all costs, and things like that.
Right.
Um, but those things I think are important in fatherhood, uh, is to have the discipline, and to see your children as God sees you. Because there's definitely
Right.
many times where we went directly across or against and have sinned against God, and He's given us grace. And
Right.
that's the greatest thing about the story, is the grace of God, that we've been saved through faith, by grace through faith.
Right, right. And how could you not give your children, grace when you know that God is giving you grace every day? And you can't be impulsive with kids. You try not to be, at least, because they learn from you. And so
Hmm.
if you're an impulsive person and your kids does something and you just reach over and slap them, real quick, as opposed to discipline them the right way through words and 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 that type of stuff, you know, they learn that example from you. And I think that's where a lot of our society is going the wrong way, because we don't have fathers in the home, and fathers didn't have fathers, and so they don't really know how to be a father. You know, the
Yeah.
I was blessed to have a great father who really, taught me how to be a man and how to be a father. And a lot of it wasn't by words, it was by deeds, and me watching him do and be diligent about what he did. And also being in church and catching some of the sermons, you know when I wasn't doing something else or thinking about other things. I would sometimes, hey, I really understand what he's talking about now.
Yeah, yeah. More is caught than taught. That's what they say.
Right.
And yeah, I know that's true because you told me that story about when you was asleep in the one of the pews. Jason, he was sleeping in one of the pews, and
Oh,
when you're a PK, I mean it's hard.
It's
Danielle, my
right,
wife,
right,
your
right,
your daughter-in-law is a PK. She knows it's
right.
tough on the PKs, and
Yeah, yeah.
you know
So
I'm a
let me
I,
tell a
I
story.
only yeah I'm gonna let you tell the story, but I went and I would visit, and me and my brother would visit just for, and it felt like forever, but it probably was a week, maybe at the
Right.
most, or a week or two, but it felt like 3 years that we had been there. And then I called back home, hey, like, Matt, how y'all doing? Dad, we go to church all
Oh,
day long. I'm tired. Come get us. And my grandmother sitting there just laughing and laughing. But no, yeah, go ahead. Tell the story
yeah,
about being
yeah.
in church.
So I guess I was about maybe 15, 14, 15, and you know we had been to church all day, and we always went all day, and so this was the 11 o'clock service. So I thought I would just take a nap on my dad, because I've heard it before and all this type of stuff. So I mean, I'm like snoring, I'm back like this, and I heard someone call my name, and I had my eyes closed, and I said, he said, Gene. And I'm like, I know that's not my daddy calling my name. So I must be imagining something. And I didn't even open my eyes. He says, Gene. And then he told one of the nurses, go over there and wake that boy up. And so, man, I opened my eyes and he was talking to me. And he says, if you can't stay awake, go over there and sit by your mama so you can stay awake. Now, I'm 14, 15, I'm all the girls, I'm looking at the girls and all this type stuff by that time. So I had to get up in the middle of church and go and sit by my mom. And, and she didn't have to keep me up because I was up from that point on.
Yeah.
And that kind of stopped me from dozing off in church. And, especially the way I was. I had my head back and I was gone.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely an embarrassing moment. There's some comedy. I mean, you growing up in church too, and you always had us in church service and Sunday
Right.
school and things like that. There's some funny things that go on in church, and God has a sense of humor. But at the
Yeah.
same time, there's always a time and a place,
Right.
and sleeping is not one of them. But
Right.
as
Right.
Grandpa did, you got the authority to say, "Hey, wake that boy up."
And
Uh,
I think there was a message to all my buddies and everything too. That, hey, y'all go to sleep. Pastor Forte is gonna call you out.
Exactly, exactly. But I want to get back to something that you brought up too is I'm always gracious, and I thank God every day, every morning that I had my mom and dad, and that I had a great father in my life. Because some people have fathers in their life, and it still doesn't work out that way because their parenting has not you know been that
Right.
great, or people grow up without their dad. Jason, I know for you,
yep.
your dad and that relationship. obviously you wrote a book on forgiveness and how to do that, because of that situation. And it's not the reality for everybody. Actually, fatherlessness is one of the main plagues of
Yes.
earth, of, not just this country, but on earth. And
Yes.
just talk a little bit about how that you're able to like overcome that, and also what that does to you, and how God really can redeem anything, because you're a father yourself. You have a daughter who's in college now, and you and your wife have been parenting her for a long time, over decades, and that's a change from what you grew up in.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit, and then I'd love to hear, Ulysses, kind of your thoughts too, because I grew up with a dad who was very young when I was born. I think he was 21 or 22. My mom was 21. They married young. They had me pretty quickly, and they divorced pretty quickly. Well, about 5 years in, my parents were divorced. So I was 5 or 6 years old and didn't really know the stability of having a mom and dad in the house all the time. And my dad um, had began to drink and then continued drinking and got really it just went down a really bad path over the years with his alcoholism, addiction, even anxiety and depression, and some of the things he's battling right now. It's been a battle, and it was very confusing and conflicting. And eventually, there was a lot of anger for me. That's why Matt referenced the book and forgiving my father. As I became a follower of Jesus, I understood the power of forgiveness and what God's word says
Right.
about it, but I never had that model of a dad. My grandfather, his father, was actually a great man, and he was probably the closest thing that I had to a father. Um,
Mm.
but I remembered as I became a follower of Jesus, my wife and I got married. I really wanted to do the opposite of what my dad had done. I wanted to have a stable marriage. Uh, Praise God, I've been married 25 years to my wife, Dawn, and we wanted to have children. And I think the reason I wanted to become a dad so much was because I just saw the effect of what my dad had on me and my brothers. I have two younger brothers,
Right.
and I just wanted to do the opposite. I was telling Matt this earlier. Like, I just wanted to be the opposite of what my dad was to me in terms of loving my daughter, being there for her, and not letting her infected, I guess, with what my dad had done in many ways with his choices of becoming an alcoholic. And I know it's an addiction, but there was a choice in there, but not being able to be there for his kids when it mattered most. And so for
Right.
me, when I became a follower of Jesus and I really started to see God as Father, you guys kind of referenced this, Ulysses, maybe you can talk
Mm-hmm.
about this. It changed everything because I saw God loving me despite my faults, despite the fact that I was a wretched sinner. And
Right.
he still sent his son to the cross for me, like as he did for both of you guys. And that changed how much I saw my daughter. And there's nothing that that kid can do that could
Right.
ever change how much I love her. Nothing.
Right. Right.
And honestly, my only goal in life, Matt, and I've told you this too, I really didn't care if she became this famous whatever, or if she got this job. And I hope she gets married someday and has lots of grandkids so I can be a great grandpa for her, to her kids. But I just wanted her to follow Jesus
Yeah.
because I said, if you do that, everything will take care of itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was
Right.
powerful for me.
Yeah,
Right.
our first duty as as followers of Christ is to make disciples, and that starts in the household, right? It
Yes, it
starts with your
does.
children,
It does.
and I think that's an important thing. And
So I honestly, Matt, I'd love to hear Ulysses talk about that
mhm,
because I don't know how many kids you or how many brothers and sisters you have, Matt, but
just one older brother.
one older brother, right? So
Mhm.
Ulysses, like, how important was that for you to make disciples right in your house of Matt and his brother, um, as you were becoming a dad and understanding, the responsibility of that?
Right. Well, I knew that giving them the choice of Christ was very important. Okay, because my dad gave that to me, and believe me, I needed that. Okay, even as a preacher's son and being in church every Sunday, you begin to experience the world and things that you haven't seen, and I think I drank my first beer at 18 or something like that. you know and so ultimately, if you give that child that background, they're going to experience life. They're going to make mistakes, but you have that background that Christ is in your corner. You know that God the Father loves you, and so when I had kids, I wanted to make sure that they knew that God loves them as much as I and that their mother loved them also. You know, and when you compare that, to me, that is one of the greatest things to, have a child, and and love that child like you know that God loves you, regardless of what their life is going to be, how great they're going to be, or how they're just going to wash dishes the rest of their life. That you know they have the love of Christ, and they also have the love of a father. That's why I can't understand nowadays when our young men, they have a child and just walk away from them and never see that child again.
Mm.
That's heartbreaking, really, to me. But I was just so blessed with a father that showed me that, and helped me to understand that. So I had to instill that in my children, and help them to understand that also.
Yeah, yeah. I think uh, the legacy of fatherhood that I come from is literally a miracle. And I say that
Yeah,
because of the nature of fatherlessness. It's a generational curse. It's something that is spiritual, that Satan has been under attack on that since Adam and Eve. He's attacked
right,
the marital union because of the family and what that is used to extend the kingdom of God. So, man, it is a miracle that and it's a privilege to hold manhood and fatherhood in such high esteem, and to be able to extend that to the next generation, right?
right,
I think it's been watered down. It's not looked at like that. And so therefore someone can come and say, well, man, they weren't brought up, maybe they didn't have a good father, or they didn't come from a good home. So then it just becomes a cycle like
right,
that. And if we're really, honest about it, uh, I like you to talk about it too, because that you were born in the basement of a hospital, and
right,
this is not. I'm 1985, born in 1985. I'm the first generation born in the hospital. Me and my brother.
right,
It's not that long ago. But
right,
like my grandparents were not allowed to have you guys in the actual hospital. They put you in they had to put them in the basement because of the color of your skin.
right,
And when if we go further back than that, that's when we talk about how fatherlessness was taught to the black community in enslavement, where women are raped and these children are being had, or the families are broken up and split. But your time, I've heard stories from growing up in Texas. I grew up in Louisiana, both in the South. When you went to school, I mean, your first day at an integrated school, you get in a fight.
right,
So tell us a
right,
little bit about that story, and like how that led you into teaching us how to become men. You always taught me, hey, stand up for yourself. Don't let nobody, like, you don't start nothing with people, but you stand up for yourself. You make sure that you demand respect. You earn
right,
respect. You don't
right,
just go out there and let people do you any kind of way. So that was a
right,
big manhood part that I thought was really good that you taught me and Brian too.
right. So it was back in the early parts of integration, early years of integration. Uh, they gave you in Texas. That was 12 years from, I think, the Dred Scott decision, or the decision. I think it's the Board of Education, where you should be integrated. And so the Supreme Court said you should be integrated, but it took them 12 or 15 years to do that. So my mother was a teacher, and she was volunteered to teach at an integrated school. And so they had this thing in Texas at that time called freedom of choice. And so you had the freedom of choice to go to the black school or to go to the white school, or to integrate. And but who white was going to integrate to a black school? So it was mostly black kids integrating to the white school. So my mother obviously wanted to make me an example, me and my sister, and she signed us up. So there was 7 kids, I believe, that went to junior high, uh, black kids that year, and I was one of the 7, and my sister was one of them. And so we were um, in class, and a kid reached back. I thought, they were trying to make friends with me or something. So he asked me to borrow a pencil. I said sure. So I let him borrow a pencil, and I'm basically the only black kid in the class. And so at the end of class, he reaches back to give me my pencil, and then he drops it on the floor, and then he says, "Pick it up inward." And so I picked up the pencil, but I also told him that to meet me at the church ground after. That's where we fought. Amazingly, was the church ground after school. And so the rumor got out that we were going to have this big fight, and I'm fighting this guy, and my sister at lunchtime she said, "Are you really going over there to the church ground and fight?" And I said, "I got to. There's no way I'm not going. Yes, I'm going." And sure enough, at the end of school, I walked over. There was a big circle. I walked in the middle of the circle. We threw a couple of punches, and after that, someone said, "Here comes Mr. Moore," who was the principal of the school. Everybody just evaporated, and just me and the guy was standing there for what used to be a circle. And sure enough, he brought us to the office, and uh, the guy took 3 days off. He didn't want to get capital punishment, but
But yeah,
my
you
mom,
had a choice, right? There was choice of
we had
corporal
a choice,
punishment.
right? But my the super, I mean the principal called my mom because he knew her. She was in the school system, and she was actually a couple of miles down the road at an elementary school. And so she came over and she said, "He'll take 3 licks." You had a choice of 3 licks with a paddle, or
For
you could
three
have
days.
3 days extension. Mom says he's going to take 3 licks while I'm here, and he's coming back to school. But uh, it was an example of having to have to, stand up for yourself. And I really didn't think how big this was until after it happened, because I never had any trouble the rest of my school. I was in the seventh, sixth. Let me see. I think it's the 7th grade at the time. I was in the 7th grade at the time, and I went to school. After that, we fully integrated, and some of the same people that were at the school when I had to fight, they were in class with me when I was a senior and all that type stuff. But I never had any other problems, and I know that had that not happened, I would have had problems the whole time,
Yeah.
and so I wanted to make sure that when I talked to Matt and Brian, you don't want to be the instigator, but you want to always stand up and be proud of who you are, and if you have to fight to do that, then you have to fight to do that.
And that's where the legend of Mean Gene started. It became a realization at Tulane, and I didn't believe it until I went to one of the alumni, dinners with some of the guys who played with my dad, and they would say, "Hey man, oh Matt, man, I played with your dad," and I say, "Hey, what did y'all really call him Mean Gene?" They're like, "Oh yeah, he Mean Gene now." Yeah, and they would tell me all the stories about how at practice you don't want to mess with Mean Gene, and he was a hard hitting D lineman, and that's one of the legacy. Matter of fact, I have a book coming out that's in the fall. It's a memoir that's called "Stay in the Game: How to Be Successful in Every Season of Life," and I talk heavily about my mom and dad, but a lot about how my dad has really shaped me in my life going forward, and the man that I've come to be. And a lot of his story will be in that book about Mean Gene and how he had his name on the hit stick at Tulane, and
Right,
that's from hitting people hard and all of these things. So uh, it's been a pleasure to have a legend on the podcast, in the flesh, a living legend here. And Jason, I didn't know if you had anything else to add to what's going on, because we got a lot. There's tons that we could be talking about, but I know we almost at 35 minutes.
We
right,
need to think about having Mr. Forte back on again with us, Matt, because I have a million questions about raising kids in a culture of sports. I mean, you have a son who played 10 years in the NFL, but how did you make sure he still was grounded in his faith. So I have so many questions, but let's save some and we'll do another podcast another time. I think the last thing I would ask, maybe Ulysses, you can leave us with this, is leave us with some encouragement for the dads that are listening, as it is Father's Day weekend and Sunday is Father's Day, maybe even what Father's Day means to you, knowing the dad that you had and knowing the impact now that you're making, not only with Matt and his brother, but also as a grandpa and the
Right.
impact you're making on his children.
Hey,
Right.
Jason, actually,
Yeah.
before we ask that, can we ask that question? I think that'd be
You
good
want to
for
do
the
it?
listeners about sports.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
because I'm gonna tell you, look, Lil Matt and Jaden, they got games and stuff like that, and y'all made it look easy. Me and Brian we played
Every
basketball, baseball, football, soccer, and man, we were on not only on the team regular season, we was in all stars.
Mm-hmm.
And y'all made it
right.
look, I mean, we went to tournaments in Florida and Georgia, Texas. Y'all made it look really easy. So I guess, you know, talk about that being a dad and a father of athletes, and how did you teach us to remain rooted in Christ, but then also in your marriage? Like that could put marriage strain on your marriage. Having to run around the practices and separate and do these things. And you guys sometimes would go and mom would bring Brian to this practice and you would take me to that one. And it was a lot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that we had made the decision, Gilda and I, that we weren't going to push our kids to play, even though I was an athlete and she was a good athlete. And when they decided that they wanted to do something, that we were going to be 100% behind them, and they wanted to play every sport. And so what we were going to do is we were going to be there. We were going to give up. We were going to be unselfish. And that's one thing that I would say that is a key attribute of fatherhood is unselfishness. You have to forget about what you want and you have to think about what's best for your children. And if I would just say, if I would circle the one thing, it's to be unselfish and to pour into your children, whatever avenue they want to go. If they want to study and be a scientist, and they know that at the age of 6 or 7, you buy all the encyclopedias, you get anything and everything that they want and to pour into them, so that they can be successful.
The fact that you said encyclopedia, ages you, but that's all good because I know it's.
Matt, we grew up on those. You know that.
No, I had him. He had all the encyclopedias lined up. Matter of fact, that was a common thread. Dad, hey, what does this mean? Or what is this type? Hey, look it
Look
up.
it
That's
up.
what he would say. Look it up.
Look it up. It's in there.
Look it up. Encyclopedia Britannica, right up on
Yeah.
Right.
the
Right.
bookcase.
Right. That's it. That's true. One thing I wanted to say is, guys, that okay, I was a football player at Tulane. My heart was set on playing pro football. I mean, I love football. It was everything to me. And it's funny how God has a way of getting His way. So I say that because uh, I was injured my junior year, and I would always pray for this. Also, this was my prayer, that I wanted to play pro football. And I was injured my junior year, and then I came back and got my starting position back my senior year. And I was injured in the sixth game of my junior year and also the sixth game of my senior year. Okay, so that kind of uh, it didn't squash the pro idea for me, but I could have gone to camp. I got a lot of letters. I showed them to Matt where people had invited me to camp, but my grandmother had told me uh, when she was living, and I might have been 12 or 13. She said, "Son, don't pour everything into football. Don't pour your everything into football. There's something else." And that started coming back to me, that was something else. So as much as I loved it, once I graduated from Tulane, I just went and got a career with Shell and pursued that career. Amazingly, my son gets to play professional football, and I get to enjoy everything but being on the field. I get to enjoy him, seeing playing. I get to meet the, you know, star players, and to realize that they are star players. They're just humans, just like the rest of us. The rest of us are, but everybody puts those guys on a pedal. So I look at that as, okay, God said, I'm not ready. Gene, Ulysses, you're not ready for this. At the time that it was 22, 23 years old. He knew my soul, he knew my spirit, he knew I wasn't ready for that, you know. But then he knew that my son was ready because of the person that my son was at 22 and 23 years old. And I got that blessing also to be able to watch my son play football. So
No, that's good.
God,
Hey,
God
you
may not give you what you want, how you want it, okay? But if you continue to love and pursue Christianity and God, you will see that He will give you what something better than what you wanted.
Yeah, hey, you
Amazing.
preaching now. You got your daddy in you. You got your daddy in you now. He up there smiling. He is in heaven
Yep.
smiling right now because he said, look at Ulysses on here preaching right now. Because hey,
Right.
that is deeply spiritual. Because
Yes. Yeah.
and I want to end with that too. Is that we, even though we have a dream and we pray, we ask God for, we request all kind
Yeah.
of things, and we may have that one dream. That dream may not be uh actually prepared for you, but you may be in the preparation process of your oncoming, it may be your child or it may be another person, but you're in the
Exactly.
preparation process and you get to experience it with them. I
Right.
think that is so cool because I used to think about, like, in the Bible, it's like, well, why does God test if he already knows everything? Like, what's the point? But he wants
Right.
to experience it with you. Like, there's certain things that God will never sin. He can't sin. It's
Right.
not his attribute. He can't do it. But he does want to experience certain things with us together. Like, I know you knew I had a good talent, but if you never experience watching me playing the game or coaching me,
Right.
that makes it doesn't feel the same
Right.
because you never experience it together. Like
Right.
watching a play unfold, like you design a screenplay and it's
Right.
it's a new type of play and you know it's gonna work, but you never get to watch it. But then you watch it and it works perfectly. As a coach, you're like, that was
Yeah.
awesome. That's why I love this game. It's
That's
because
right.
of that. So that's the same thing, right? Is
In life.
though we may have a dream in life or some kind of major goal, just because God may say no, it might be a no, not right now, or not
Right.
for you, but I'm going to use you for something that's the same goal, but it's for somebody else. And that's the
Right.
ultimate of humility to me.
Right. And you have to be willing to accept that. It could have been a different way. I could have been bitter and mad at God and all this type of stuff because I didn't get to play pro football, and I've been praying for 15 years for something that I wanted. Uh, but look now, you know.
Hmm.
So
That's awesome. Ulysses, who was your favorite football team growing up?
Oh
that,
no, don't do this. Don't do this. Because he's the same. He's the
how
same.
about them Cowboys?
I knew it.
Hey,
How are you
hey,
feeling when Matt was beaten up on? I say our Cowboys because I'm a Cowboys fan too. How are you feeling when Matt was beaten up on Dallas those couple
what,
of years in
what,
2010 and 2012 and 13?
right. Well, actually, I ended up jumping ship because
Okay,
when they
that's good.
fired Tom Landry, and the way they fired Tom Landry, I said, hey, if this is how it's going to go, I'm going to find me a new team. And just so happened, Brad ended up playing with the Bears. So
That was your
I
new team.
go Bears.
That Tom Landry firing, I was old enough to remember that. That did a lot of damage to a lot of fans. They were not happy with the way
Oh,
that
oh,
went down.
it
So
was over for me once that happened, and then the second time when he did
Jimmy
Jimmy
what's
Johnson.
his name,
Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson, and it was really over then. Because I was still
Yeah.
kind of following them a little bit with Jimmy when they won the Super Bowls back to back. But hey,
Yeah. I'm not going to
yeah,
get into this. Matt knows my heart right now. I'm on a break with the Cowboys. Let's just put it that way. It's not
I
a
hear you.
divorce, but it's a
Was a
separation
break.
and a break right
we're on
now.
a break.
We need a
I hear you.
break.
We're
Okay.
not seeing other people. We're on a break.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But no,
Oh,
thank you, thanks, Dad, for shedding some
Oh, thank you.
wisdom, and for the
Thank you
listeners to be
guys.
able to hear a little bit of your story too, and us growing up. And thanks, Jason, for sharing about your background and your wisdom in fatherhood as well, because we're all fathers on this podcast, and we're
Right.
all believers, and we're all sons as well. So thank
hmm.
you for being on
Amen.
Sports Spectrum, and tune in next time.
Yeah. Happy Father's Day.
Thank you. Happy Father's Day to you guys.
Hey, thanks for watching Sports Spectrum here on YouTube. You can click our next video, or you can check out our website, sportspectrum.com.